Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last part of debunking royal birth. And in this segment, I'd like just to concentrate on some of the behaviors of some of these leaders through their, what they call eccentricities and unusual interest or erratic behavior have left a mark on history in terms of their actions and what they call in terms of their idiosyncrasies that have often had far-reaching consequences and continue to be a subject of fascination and study, including the ones of Africa. But let me begin with King Leopold II of Belgium. That was in 1865 to 1909. Leopold, in terms of his colonial rule over Congo Free State, now the Democratic Republic of Congo, is widely criticized for his brutal exploitation of the African population. He actually oversaw forced labor in terms of atrocities and the extraction of valuable resources, resulting in suffering and the death of millions of Congolese. You could also argue in terms of another guy called Ivan the Terrible, even from the sound of his name, Ivan the Terrible, was a Tsar of Russia in 1547 to 1584. Ivan, basically the fourth, known as Ivan the Terrible, was infamous for his reign marked by extreme cruelty and violence, and even organized the massacre of Novogorod, where thousands of residents were actually killed, and his rule was actually characterized by brutal pangs and even executions. Then another one was called King Henry the Eighth of England. That was from 1509 to 1547. Henry the Eighth's separation from the Roman Catholic Church and the establishment of the Church of England resulted in significant religious and even political turmoil in England. He actually dissolved monasteries, leading to a loss of religious institutions and the displacement of monks and even nuns. Then another one was King Louis the 16th of France. That is from 1774 to 1792. Louis the 16th rule was actually marked by political and even financial mismanagement, contributing to the economic crisis that led to the French Revolution, and his refusal to support political reforms and his perceived extravagance played a role in his eventual downfall and execution. Then you could also look at Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, that was in 1894 to 1917. Nicholas, in terms of leadership during the World War I, and his reluctance, for example, to address social and even political issues in Russia, contributed to the Russian Revolution in 1917. And his abdication led to the eventual establishment of a communist government under Lenin. Clearly, you could see that many of these monarchies were overthrown by some kind of democracy or individuals who felt like they were not doing the right thing to serve the populace. And perhaps that's a checker on some of these monarchs. King Ferdinand II of Spain in 1479 to 1516, Ferdinand II, along with his wife, Queen Isabella, were known for Spanish Inquisition, which sought to enforce religious orthodoxy and even eliminate heresy. So the Inquisition actually resulted in persecution, torture, and even the execution of many individuals. So again, the argument I'm proponing, I'll not go ahead and mention the likes of people who are not really, okay, we can't argue and say that there are people who are not really nobles, because I wanted to bring in some individuals in terms of the African context. But where I'm coming from now, because I've been laying ground for you and making this position, trying to understand that these individuals did not have different blood from my blood, and that's the argument I'm trying to propose. And perhaps I'll try to underscore some monarchs that have actually been overthrown because of insurrections, perhaps, or misbehavior of these so-called nobles. The argument here is that throughout history there have been numerous examples of monarchs that have actually been overthrown in various parts of the world, and I'll give you some examples so that you can understand. I'll start with the one that's popular. Probably many of you know the French Revolution in 1789, where King Louis the 16th of France and his wife Queen Marie Antoinette were overthrown during the French Revolution. They were both eventually executed by guillotine, marking the end of the so-called Bourbon monarchy in France. Yeah, you could also argue in terms of the so-called Russian Revolution of 1917, where Tsar Nicholas II of Russia was overthrown during the Russian Revolution. He and his family were actually executed by the Bolshevik revolutionaries, leading to the end of the so-called Romanov dynasty. Yeah. Then another that comes to mind is the so-called Iranian Revolution of 1979, where Shah Mohammad Reza, remember, Pelvani of Iran, was actually overthrown during the Iranian Revolution, and the revolution led to the establishment of an Islamic Republic, and the Shah went into exile. So all these examples are telling you that, listen, even as you have those so-called privileged positions, as we may argue, it's very important that you actually dispense them on behalf of the ordinary people. Yeah, we could also argue in terms of the Romanian Revolution of 1989. We have a guy called Nicol Coscu, the General Secretary of the Romanian Communist Party, was overthrown during the Romanian Revolution. He and his wife, Elena Koskowski, were actually captured and even executed. Okay, and these are examples again that are playing out. We got another one called Nepalese Civil War, which happened in 2001. King Gladneda of Nepal was actually briefly overthrown when the Nepalese monarchy was actually suspended, and the monarchy was later reinstated, but it lost much of its power and influence. Who doesn't know about the first Kabaka crisis, the second Kabaka crisis for the sake of Uganda, and the third Kabaka crisis, as we argue in our book of constitutional mandate? All those aspects. In terms of the Arab Spring, I told you about the Arab Spring of 2010, 2011. Several Arab countries experienced uprising and challenging the leadership during the so-called Arab Spring. In Tunisia, for example, President Zain al-Abidine Ben Ali was actually overthrown, and in Egypt, President Hosni Mubarak was actually overthrown. While not monarchs in traditional sense, but these leaders held authoritarian power, including the likes of Idi Amin for the sake of Uganda, and other leaders for the sake of Uganda, to mention but a few. And then you could also argue in terms of the Libyan civil war that happened in the likes of Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, who ruled Libya for over 4 decades, was overthrown and killed during the Libyan civil war. And then you could also look at it in terms of the Yemeni revolution, in terms of 2012, where President Ali Abdallah Saleh of Yemen was actually ousted from power after months of protests and crashes during the Yemeni revolution. So the argument I'm propounding here that you don't have to be a royal in the strict word of the word royal as we know it, but you may have created a dynasty by virtue of your acts, and then you create a legacy, and if this does not augur well with the populace, then there are likely to be challenges, and these are some of the offshoots of revolutions or uprisings or coups or international interventions. Yeah, even way back from, I could argue it in terms of the 14th century BC, for example. There's an argument that had to do with the Pharaoh Akhenaten. Okay, Pharaoh Akhenaten attempted to establish what they call a monotheistic religion centered around the worship of the sun, god Aten, which actually deviated from traditional Egyptian polytheism. Okay, and these religious reforms led to his unpopularity and his eventual death. And his successor actually worked to erase his legacy, effectively overthrowing his religious revolution. You could also argue in terms of King Richard II. This happened in the 14th century in England. Richard II of England actually faced rebellion led by Henry Bolingbroke, who later became King Henry IV. So Richard's autocratic rule in terms of financial mismanagement and conflicts with the nobility contributed to his disposition, and he was eventually imprisoned and likely murdered as well. You could also argue in terms of Emperor Wang Mang. That happened in the 1st century CE in China. Yeah, Wang Mang interrupted the so-called Han Dynasty in China with his Xin Dynasty, and he implemented significant land reforms and wealth redistribution policies. However, these policies led to social unrest, and Wang Mang's rule was actually overthrown after a relatively short period of time. You could also argue in terms of King Tarquin, the proud in the 6th century BCE in Rome. Tarquin, the proud, was actually the last king of ancient Rome before the establishment of the Roman Republic, and his tyrannical rule and cruelty and disrespect for Roman traditions led to his overthrow, and this eventually marked the end of transition from monarchy to republicanism in Rome. And so, I mean, these are just 1,001 examples that I'm trying to give for us to comprehend and demystify the concept of mythism in terms of birthright. So, I mean, it clearly tells you that these were individuals, lucky perhaps, but overthrown for the betterment. There's Emperor Nero in the 1st century of Rome. Nero's extravagant lifestyle in terms of physical mismanagement and even persecution of Christians led to his unpopularity among the Roman populace and even the Senate, and a series of revolts and rebellions erupted, and Nero eventually took his own life, leading to a year of 4 emperors and the end of what they call the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Yeah, you could also argue in terms of Pharaoh Cleopatra the 7th in the 1st century BCE in Egypt. Cleopatra the 7th ruled Egypt alongside Roman leaders Julius Caesar and even Mark Antony. So after their defeat at the Battle of Actium, Cleopatra and Antony committed suicide, marking the end of what they call the Ptolemaic dynasty and even Egypt's status on an independent kingdom. You could also argue in terms of King Charles I in the 17th century. Charles's first conflict with Parliament over taxation and his attempts to rule without its consent led to English Civil War, and he was actually captured, put to trial, and eventually executed in 1649, marking the end of the English monarchy for a period as it was then. So as I said, listen, the ancient monarchs were overthrown for various reasons, including their autocratic rule, unpopular policies, religious or even cultural differences, and conflicts with powerful factions or institutions. So their downfall often resulted in significant historical and even political changes in their respective regions. And we're arguing that even for the sake of our country, of our populace, or our nation for that purpose, these things shouldn't be strained. We should bear to learn lessons from them. We should comprehend some of these things and understand that in the true interpretation of the word royalty or nobility, it's a myth, it's a fallacy. All of us are equal. You may be lucky that you've been given that place as a temporary custody to serve humanity. So look at it as one another's keeper. Look at it as a dispensation of grace that has been endowed on you, okay? To be able to help humanity rather than subjugate or perhaps victimize or perhaps colonize or perhaps torture and manipulate individuals to the expense of your own overstay or continue to stay in this kind of privileged positions that you may have today. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. That is the component that we've been having in terms of demystifying the concept of birthright. As I said, all these things have their origin in terms of the dispensation of constitutionalism, which go back in terms of the Magna Carta in 1215 as a foundational document that limited kings' powers and ensured certain rights for their subjects. And that's something that you must understand, as I said. So God bless you, and thank you for your attention.